Well, good morning, everyone, and Happy New Year. This is our first meeting of 2022 for the Municipal Accountability Review Board for Thursday, January 13th. We're calling our meeting to order and want to extend best wishes for a successful, happy, and healthy New Year to all of you today. I'm going to ask my co-chair if she has any opening remarks today. Ms. Shaw?
I do not, Madam Secretary.
All right, excellent. Thank you. We are going to turn to our public comment period today. If there's a member of the public who wishes to speak, please unmute yourself, state your name and the town that you are affiliated with, and you'll have 2 minutes to give public remarks.
Hello, Darrell Cummings regarding West Haven.
Good morning, Mr. Cummings. You have the floor.
Thank you. I am a former West Haven resident for 18 years, recently moved to DC. I'm concerned not only for the residents, but I have a significant amount of West Haven general obligation municipal bonds. And if I may ask for unanimous consent to waive the 2-minute speaking rule, as I have just over 300 words, which may extend that 2-minute timeline. And it is important that stakeholders and residents have an opportunity to speak for this 4-year issue that the city has been facing. Is that a yes?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. All right. The residents of West Haven are as concerned and frustrated as the members of the board regarding the lack of action and transparency, the constant promises from the administration without delivering, and the rosy assessments. In regards to transparency, in October, the finance director reported to the city council that the city anticipates a $2.2 million surplus for the 21 year, while at the same time forwarded communication to the MARB board, stating that there's an expected deficit of $1.8 million without the $4 million restructuring funds, which the finance director and the mayor was aware that the board was considering holding back. There's a rosy picture given to the residents, and reality is a different story. In regards to promises, the mayor stated to the board and city council that an ARPA plan would be delivered to the council for review and 2 public sessions prior to submission to the Treasury Department, which is required by the 31st of October. I'm sorry, 31st of January, which is in 18 days. Nothing has been delivered. The mayor states that no ARPA funds have been used yet, but if you refer to page 10 of the present budget, it shows a $1.575 million line item used as revenue. If it has been replaced by the additional pilot or distressed municipalities, that is fine. The mayor herself cannot do that. The only board that can do it is the city council. There has not been a request to alter the budget in regards to that. It's another example of the administration refusing to act within proper procedure. There is further concern about the ARPA funds. The Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, has, in her guidance in the formulation of a plan, states that residents, community leaders, business owners should be meeting to decide, quote, the appropriate use of the funds, bottom up, not top down. We know past performance is not indicative of future results, but if we look back to the CARES Act, less than 72 hours after the city council approved the resolution to accept and expend the CARES Act funds, city employees received large checks, which currently are still under review, although Treasury guidance in regards to that, the premium payments should go to, quote, the lowest wage earners first. That also did not occur. Finally, based on the city's lack of action, your board, MARB, should be treating the city similar to a parent-child relationship. If they're not taking out the garbage, if they're not shoveling the driveway and other chores, the allowance should be withheld. So I would recommend, and I conferred upon my return earlier this week to West Haven with others, I would recommend that the board withhold the $4 million or at a maximum provide the $1.8 million to make the city whole, retain the remainder of the $2.2 million, move the city into Tier 4, appropriately fill the positions necessary, install an interim qualified city manager to protect the city from potential Fed clawback in regards to ARPA funds, and change that culture within City Hall. The residents have been and are still relying on board members. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Secretary, could I please put everybody on mute and stop the interference, and then have everybody, those that are speaking of board members, come off mute?
Yes, go right ahead. Okay. If board members or any other participants, when you're ready to speak, please unmute. Are there any other members of the public who wish to provide comment today? Okay, seeing none, we'll close our public comment portion of our agenda. Next up is the approval of the minutes for the December 1st, 2021 regular meeting. Is there a motion?
Moved. Bob White.
Thank you, Bob.
I second that.
Thank you, Christine. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion or edits to the minutes? All right, seeing none, Julian?
Yes, and as I call members' names, just don't forget to unmute yourselves. Mr. White,
Yes.
Mr. Waxenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Hamilton,
Yes.
Mr. Brockman,
Yes.
Ms. Shaw,
Yes.
Secretary McCaw,
Abstain.
and are there any other members that have joined the meeting that I did not name?
David Biller here, yes.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, the minutes have passed. So first today we have the City of West Haven. We will begin with our subcommittee update, which you have a report from Julian in your meeting materials. Julian, can you please provide us with the highlights of the subcommittee on December 1st?
Yes, we met on the 14th of December. And members will recall that back in the fall, the secretary had communicated to the city to submit plans and timelines for bringing the city into compliance with the current memorandum of agreement. And so we have been working through several action plans related to that effort. The city has submitted, and the subcommittee has reviewed an action plan for addressing a number of issues related to the purchasing function and related to staffing of the purchasing function. The subcommittee also received an initial action plan addressing information technology infrastructure and security measures, and that plan is in the process of being revised based on some feedback that the city received. And the next area to address from the MOA is the action plan to address the human resources findings from a consulting report that was issued back in 2019. That plan is in draft format and will be submitted to the subcommittee in the upcoming meeting later this month. So we have various action plans at different stages of development that address requirements within the memorandum of agreement and to address any outstanding, well, I should say, certain outstanding items in the city's audit findings from the last 2 fiscal years. There are some, as I'll just hit this item now, within the corrective action plan, there are remaining open items related to pension investment and pension fund management that remain open and have not been taken up through these other action plans. The subcommittee also received an update on various open positions, the plan for staffing a full purchasing office, and the plan there was to create a procurement director position and to restructure an existing position, which was hired approximately a year ago, for a purchasing director, to restructure that as a purchasing specialist who would report to the new procurement director. That position is fully funded within the existing budget. The new procurement director position is proposed to be funded through the additional pilot funding that the city has. There was an update on the accounts payable position, which had been recently filled with an internal candidate, which in turn created another vacancy for a junior accounting position. And we received an update on the human resources generalist position, which is in the process of being recruited. And then lastly, we touched briefly on the city's developing plans for use of ARPA funds. At this point, there is not a plan in place. There has city staff have attended various presentations, workshops to better understand the requirements, but at this point, there is no plan, at least as of the subcommittee meeting, there was no plan in place. And our next meeting is scheduled for the 25th of January. And I did not mean to skip over the Cohn-Resnick audit. That was also discussed. We had a quick update at the subcommittee meeting, but that is an item on this agenda as well. So Ms. Kennison will cover that as then, I believe, the next item on the agenda.
Great, thank you. So a couple of follow-up questions. First, with regards to the ARPA plan, Mayor Rossi, can you let us know the progress that you're making on that plan? When will it be available? When can MARB expect that to be submitted? And when do you intend to submit to City Council?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, we are working on the plan. As everyone, I'm pretty sure, knows, the Treasury just released the final rules last week. I have been on a few webinars myself regarding difference now in lost revenue and how they are counting and giving options for it. I have been working, I have a plan that's just in draft with our grants administration, and I have several projects. I am also putting together a group of professionals, if you will, to go over this and assist as well. I'm just waiting for all of their ethics forms to be complete, and then we'll be having an organizational meeting, not this coming week, but the week after, to put them in place. And then we will be going through and looking through this before I turn it over to City Council. I want to make sure that I do my due diligence and we do what we're supposed to be doing on the executive branch.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mayor, the plan should be submitted to MARB simultaneously so that we are aware of the intent for investments and how you've satisfied compliance with Treasury guidance. So if you could make sure that that comes over, that would be greatly appreciated. With respect to the MOA, on the purchasing and AP, I'm glad to hear that you filled an internal candidate. I wanted to confirm that the backfill of the junior accountant is something that will be a priority for the city?
That is correct, Secretary McCaw. Frank Czaplinski. Bob Ziskowski and I have met with 4 candidates this week. We are scheduled, I believe, to meet with the final candidate on Friday. Our intention is to have that position, at least an offer, extended by the end of next week.
Great, thank you. And with respect to the purchasing and AP final plan for implementation, and I believe in the subcommittee, a timeline, when would we expect to see that, Frank?
I believe, Michael, that final plan that's been completed, correct?
Yeah, let me come over.
Michael Milone will come over and give you a quick update. He's been spearheading that.
Great, Julian, feel free to jump in.
I didn't know if you could hear me or see me. I was on the other side of the room, but anyway, this is Michael Malone. We had sent a draft of the purchasing manual up to Julian to look at, and he gave us some guidance and suggestions, which were very helpful anyway. Yesterday, we completed the final draft, and the only thing that waits for its transmittal to the staff is I wanted Frank to take one last look at it. So as soon as he's okay with it, that will go out to the entire staff of employees in Cheshire. So what they will have received, I'm sorry, just the department. Yeah, West Haven, what did I say?
You said Cheshire.
Cheshire, I'm sorry. 28 years, it's hard to forget. Anyway, it's not going to Cheshire, it's going to West Haven. Anyway, we had sent out about 3 weeks ago, just to give you the background, and then we're going to go through this in detail at the committee meeting in 2 weeks. But anyway, we sent out the complete training manual and guidelines for the Munis system and sort of an overview of purchasing as it relates to Munis. That's been in the hands of the employees for about 3 weeks. We're starting to work, Frank's starting to work with some of the employees to get them trained, and that's going to be, I guess, more aggressively pursued next week because our IT department has been transferring all of our employees over to the new release of Microsoft, so that has taken up their time. So they have the guidelines. The employees have the guidelines for the Munis system. They're reviewing it, and so on. Now, what we're sending out to them to complement that is the purchasing manual, which basically covers the alphabet soup of issues and problems and processes that they'll deal with, such as bidding, RFPs, and all the other things that we wouldn't address necessarily in a training manual. So that has been finalized. That was a point of discussion at the last subcommittee meeting because it was a little late in meeting the deadline simply because of a lot of issues in trying to clean up the document. But anyway, it's finalized for all intents and purposes once Frank looks at it today, and then it will be sent out to the key staff throughout the city. And then what will happen from there is there'll be a training session in addition to the Munis training session where we'll be sitting down with staff to review this manual, go through all of the guidelines, and hopefully answer any questions they have to ensure that there's compliance, and also use it as an opportunity to make any corrections or changes that they see fit. But as long as Frank approves it, this copy will go up to Julian in the next day or so. And then that'll be pretty much the foundation as we proceed, and basically be used once we have our purchasing staff in place to actually formalize some of the implementations of the things that we're recommending in the manual. The manual calls for significant involvement on the part of the purchasing agent and the people in the purchasing division. So it's incumbent upon us to get those positions filled as soon as we can so that some of the references that we make in that manual are in fact legitimate, where they can go to people for guidance and where we have people on board to take certain actions that we are outlining. So that's kind of a long summary of where we are at this moment, but at least the pieces are in place, and now it's a matter of the training and the education and professional development portion of this, which is really going to be where the rubber meets the road.
Other questions?
Secretary?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Can you give us Frank, or can you give us an update on the purchasing positions? Have they been
yes.
posted? Where's the status?
They have been posted. The purchasing director and the buyer, both positions have been posted. The formal approval from the city council has not come yet. They held it in committee at the last meeting, but we are moving forward. The council does know that these are extremely important positions, and I have indicated where the funding is coming from. I have provided descriptions of the duties and an analysis and a summary of why these positions need to be hired immediately.
Thank you, Frank. Can you please forward us a copy of what you provided to council? I'll be following up with formal correspondence as well to indicate the importance of prompt action so that you have
Absolutely,
the
Madam
system.
Secretary.
Thank you so much. Other discussion? Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. So there's been discussion around the scope of the audit that's currently underway and the extent to which it will address some of the current financial controls and offer some opinions on how to bolster financial controls. And I'm wondering if Mr. Malone can comment when you describe the training and the preparation of the manual that's currently underway, the Munis training, to what extent does that approach to the new training reflect some of the observations of the auditor? Because I don't think that there's been a formal or conclusion of what their findings have been.
And Christine, can I clarify? Obviously, we have their standard financial audit, and we have our Cohn-Resnick audit as a result of the suspicious activity that had occurred. Which one are you referring to?
I'm referring to the audit that I understood would address some of the issues that gave rise to the misappropriation of the funds, which extends to the concerns expressed about the internal review and approval of invoices and the like. So it's the audit that would attempt to cover
Resnick audit. Okay, go ahead, Frank. You can answer Christine's question. The next agenda item is a full update on the Cohn-Resnick audit, which Kim Kennison will provide to the board.
Sure. Good morning, Ms. Shaw. So as part of this training, even though we did not have the formal findings of the audit, what we did do was spend several hours with Tyler Technologies. We requested that they walk us through what they believe are best practices as far as purchasing an AP using the Munis system to the full extent that it is capable. So that is what we are using as a base to build the training around.
And Kim, can you speak to we did include in the scope of the audit, as they evaluate the activities that took place in West Haven, the extent to which there are internal control deficiencies or weaknesses, they will be identifying them. They will look at their policies and procedures to determine if they are adequate in addressing any of those deficiencies. Kim, anything more that you want to comment on the CR audit?
Sure, that is correct, Secretary. Anything as they're going through their testing that they have discovered will come to our attention, Christine, so you're aware. Whether it is CRF funds or not, even if it's in that same pathway of their testing, they're not going out and testing every single policies and procedures and controls in play. It is focused on CRF. But while they're looking at CRF, should they see deficiencies in specific areas, that will be noted within their report. Shall I move on to my update, Secretary?
We can do that before we do so.
Sorry.
Christine, did you have any more questions before we did the detailed audit?
No, I just want to acknowledge that I think it's a positive that external advice has been sought on a going forward basis until we get the findings of the audit. So I appreciate that response, Frank.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the subcommittee report out before Kim provides us with a Cohn-Resnick audit update?
Matt has his hand up, Secretary.
Yeah, I have a non-audit question.
Sure.
The pension management and funds and moving forward, I know that's an open item that we've talked about for a couple of years. And obviously there's a lot of other things that are sort of on the plate that are time sensitive. So, but is there a timeline for when we hope to sort of move that forward and put together a plan for addressing those issues? And if not, can we put one together?
I don't have a formal one, Mr. Brockman, but I will sit with Lee Tiernan before the end of this week and advise that we need to have a formal plan in place to get his advice on how best to address the various commissions police and fire that will have to inevitably give their blessing to whatever we do.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the trickier open items that
Yeah,
will take a long time to sort of work through. So I just want to make sure we don't
correct.
drop.
Now, one thing just to reconfirm is that the city has been fully funding the ADEC each year, and with the Allingtown fire for the past 2 years, they have made additional contributions. As I'm hoping they will, well, they are this year, but as the pilot monies and state monies came in heavier for Allingtown as well, I'm drafting up a recommendation to the council to actually make a larger contribution than we originally had in the budget.
Great. Thank you.
And the two other fire, thank you, Michael. The two other fire districts are doing the same.
Well, we all know that this is going to be an open audit finding again this year, and probably will record a repeat because attention has not been able to be put in this area. One of the requests that the secretary had to the mayor on her letter in November the 15th of 2021 was for the city to provide the secretary with a list of a timeline updating when these deliverables would be coming through. So Frank, this is not a new item. This is an ongoing item. And I don't think our focus should shift from the existing audit that's going on that I'm going to give you an update on. But it should prioritize what the priority is. So if this is not an open hot button that we need to focus on, then it should say, I'm going to do this in 2022, maybe the second half of the year, or maybe you're not able to do it at all. But we need to have a plan so that we understand when you will and meet those deadlines. We haven't received that. We just hear we're working on it, we're working on it, we're working on it. We just really need a good plan for each one of those items, and knowing that you can't get everything done all at once. But let's bridge out what that focus should be.
Understood. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Following up on this, Mark, following up on Matt's question, I have reviewed the fire district's report regarding the pensions, and it really has been 2 years. I mean, for a year they were drafting an RFP. For another year, they supposedly were sending out an RFP. And then when you look at it, it basically says that the fire districts have conceded that they, for all intent and purposes, don't intend to do this. So my question is, just to reiterate the seriousness of this matter. We've been talking about this for 2 years. It's almost a delay, deny type of attitude by the districts and the police to maintain the status quo, which has a fully funded system, and one of them less than 20% or at 20%. I mean, it gets to be comical after a while as to what the seriousness is. And based on, I think it was Kim that just said, moving this to a specific timeline, actionable date, that MARB can be assured that there's going to be action taken on this specific item is, to me, imperative, especially when you're talking about pensions. So I just wanted to voice that. And secondly, as far as the ARPA issue that the mayor spoke to and her intent to convene a working group, et cetera, and then forward a plan to MARB, there again, do we have a specific time that MARB can expect this to be before it for review? Because it's, again, a very frustrating position where we meet, and the subcommittee meets, of course, monthly, and we hear we're working on it. And that issue, as well as the hiring issue, where the town council, in effect, I don't want to say kills the issue of hiring, but doesn't take action at one of its meetings. My question is, how serious are people taking our concern relative to the overall picture of what we see happening before us? I have faith in the people that are there, but it's very frustrating that meeting after meeting we hear this is the progress that we'll get back for as time goes on. And I know it does take time, but 2 to 3 years is a little bit outside the realm of timeliness, I think. So I would encourage some specificity as to what we can expect.
Mayor, do you have a timeline in which we will receive the ARPA plan?
I don't have a timeline together. As I said earlier, when I got on, the final regs just came out. I'm of the method that I want to do this correct, right, and we will never get this kind of money again to take care of the issues in West Haven going forward. So as I said, I've reached out to CCM. I'm waiting on some information from them as well. My understanding is a lot of municipalities are in the same situation as myself. There's very few completed plans that have been passed by the legislative body and their legislative body and gone forward. So again, once I get the team together, I will, like I said, will forward you the plan, so then you'll have the plan, but the timeline will definitely be there.
So I think two things are particularly important. First, I want to note that Treasury has been providing guidance since July of last year, and they keep clarifying further. However, I mean, the general terms of use are not significantly changing. So I respect the fact, and I encourage you to ensure full compliance. So number one, I think it's important that the board gets an assurance that no funds will be expended until the city council has affirmatively voted on a plan and that MARB has had an opportunity to comment. Just to ensure that we're also in agreement that use is consistent with Treasury guidance, particularly as we have an open audit that is underway. So Mayor, I'd like your assurance on that. And then secondly, as we go into the next subcommittee, if you could prepare a timeline, and Frank has a couple that are on his plate pertaining to the open MOA items that need to become very specific. Here's when we'll have a final action plan. Here's the hiring and deadlines for when you seek to achieve that, and build ARPA in as well, so that the public can see that there's accountability and expectations for delivering these products. And you have something to measure yourselves against. So that would be my request, but I do think it's important for the board's confirmation from you that we will not see any dollars expended until council's approved and MARB has had a chance to comment.
And just so that you know, absolutely no dollars have been spent. And actually, to give more reassurance to the city council, I have Frank taking I don't want to say a picture of the bank account. The only change has been is that we are earning interest during this time frame, but we have not spent any dollars. I don't intend on spending any dollars until a full plan has been put into place. Whether or not we reserve some money for future use, not knowing what's going to happen in the future with the pandemic and things like that. And I will say, I agree with you. I've been reading on the Treasury guidelines, and yes, it has been coming out. But one of the major changes this particular time was the loss of revenue and how you don't necessarily have to do that complicated exercise, if you will. You can do the 10 million. So I thought that was, you know, a big deal and something that we're exploring at this point to see which one is more, you know, advantageous to the residents that would give us, you know, the most bang for our buck, if you will, to take care of this. Because as I said, we do have a lot of need in West Haven, and I think that this is welcome, this money to do some good things for the residents.
Thank you, Mayor. And finally, we want to make sure that you have sound policies and procedures in place before spending. So if you have approval of the board and MARB is comfortable with how you're utilizing the funds in compliance with Treasury guidance, the last requirement is that the procedures are in place to avoid any concerns about activity. Obviously, the results of the audit report will be very important, and an assessment that the procedures you're putting in place are adequate to prevent any mishappenings occurring in West Haven before spending. Frank, I see your hand up, and then we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Yes, Madam Secretary, I just wanted to confirm that the council did in fact pass a resolution that no spending would be done until a formal approval by themselves. And as part of their normal monthly financial package, the monies within the ledger itself are in distinct funds. So the reports that the mayor were referring to was a balance sheet report that shows them the deferred revenues that came in and the balance in the fund being exactly the same, indicating that nothing has been spent yet.
Thank you so much, Frank. If there are no other questions on the subcommittee update, I'm going to turn it over to Kim to give us an update on the Cohn-Resnick audit.
Thank you, Madam. So we had a brief conversation this week to get an update from Cohn and learned that Cohn-Resnick has received 90% of their requests from the city of West Haven of all of the items that they have so far requested. There seems to be delays as far as providing the information, and that information that they've requested should be readily available, is what I'm told. But it doesn't seem like that the city is not providing that information as being deliberate. It seems as if that there is a lack of focus or conflict of priorities, conflicting priorities that is causing the delays, and or maybe a lack of urgency. But there should be urgency in this matter. Cohen will be looking to be on site again in the next week or week and a half, and their plans are to complete all of their field work and gather all of their materials by the end of this month so that they can begin drafting the report. Now, in order to do that, it's going to require that West Haven makes puts their attention and focus on this matter. Now, the real importance of this is the timeline that West Haven's own auditors, Clifton Larson and Allen, will begin their audit field work the first week of February, is what I was told through Cohen. And so therefore, Cohen's testing must be completed prior to CLNA actually starting their audit, because we know that the city will then definitely struggle with providing information to two auditors. So I'm asking, I'm sure this board is asking, that the city of West Haven provide Cohn-Resnick with all of their outstanding items as soon as possible. In addition to that, once Cohen is able to complete their drafting of the document, we should then be able to see a final report within 30 to 45 days. But they're not able to even begin drafting until they complete the testing and the field work. That's all, Secretary.
Thank you, Kim. Questions on the update on the Cohn-Resnick audit? Okay.
Yeah, I have a question. Do we have a list of the 10% of the items that have not yet been received? Do you have a list of those items?
I do not, Tom.
I received an email from Cohn-Resnick yesterday, Mr. Hamilton. I can forward that on to Ms. Kennison.
Okay, I think it might be good if OPM staff gets a list of the actual items and follows up with Frank and the West Haven staff.
So, Tom, to be clear, Cohn-Resnick in past, when they've run into issues where they were concerned about responsiveness, they will pull OPM in and put us on copy, and we do that follow-up directly. When that has happened, West Haven has been responsive. So we will get the list, and obviously Mayor Rossi and Frank, you know, it's all hands on deck to produce these materials so that they can stay on schedule, and you can ultimately stay on schedule for audit. So Cohn brings us in when they feel that there's a challenge with getting responsiveness, and we'll certainly obtain the list. But I would like to be reassured from Mayor and from Frank that expedited attention will be placed on closing down these few items that are remaining.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll take responsibility for that. I have been the point person pulling information in, so I didn't have to pull the team off of the normal audit activities that they were trying to get for CLNA, as well as the upcoming budget cycle. So the bottleneck is me, and I will address that.
Thank you.
And Cohen did respond that when asked and pushed to shove, they did get materials on that same day.
All right, Frank, we know you have a lot on your plate, but there's a lot riding on this, and you obviously need resources and ARPA to get out to your community that's in need. Those dollars can't flow. There are legislators, the governor is very interested, so we would really appreciate that being your top priority. So thank you very much, sir. Any other questions on the Cohn-Resnick audit update? All right. We're going to do the monthly financial report for November 2021, and Frank, I'll turn it over to you for an overview.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. So you should have the report. The revenues, you'll see that we are still projecting in excess of the budget. That is being driven by the new pilot calculation, as well as some sale of assets. You'll see on page 2 of the report the individual line items, the increases, decreases. We are projecting a decrease in the Parks and Recreation, again, as the pandemic and other activities prevent large gatherings of people. Tax collections are in line with prior years. We have not changed any assumptions around tax revenues. So those are coming in. On page 4, you'll see a breakdown by department of current forecast versus the budget. Some departments you'll see are well over budget. Some of that is coming out of Public Works. You'll see on the bottom in the city insurance, we have seen some very large claims come through for general liability. So I'm trying to reach out to the risk manager to see if we can get an understanding. We're seeing it both on the city side and on the sewer side. So when we get to the sewer department, you'll see that that is driving the projection for the sewer fund into a bit of a deficit. So I'm trying to get an understanding around that as to why we're seeing such high impacts there. On page 5, you'll see the same numbers broken down, not by department, but by functional area, being wages versus, travel, etc. Overall, I made a comment last month or the month before that overtime is up, but you will see that a big portion of the reason of that is that there are positions that haven't been staffed. So we're seeing savings in the regular wages line offset by overtime. And again, on the roughly mid-page there, you'll see the health and general liability insurance. I'm projecting $250,000 negative impact against budget. For the entire year, and then I'm sorry, on page 6 is an update that I received from Matt and the Board of Education. So as they continue to refine those numbers, we will provide that to you as well. Page 7 you'll see is an update on the city as a whole. We are still projecting a surplus, and again, that is being driven entirely by the excess pilot funds, the over budget pilot funds that are coming in due to the new calculation, and that is offsetting the unfavorable expenditures that we're seeing. From the sewer department, again, revenues are in line with prior year. We're not seeing any real surprises there. You'll notice on page 9, I'm trying to find it here. I think it's buried in health and general liability insurance. Well, we are seeing some very heavy claims there. I am projecting that, I'm sorry, it shows in there, yeah, health and liability. So I am projecting on page 10, you'll see an overage to budget. And again, trying to understand what's actually driving that, if it's real or not, if it's prior year claims that are now just flowing through. But when the budgets were built, we did use a 3-year history to project, and of course, the nature of insurance and liability claims, it isn't always the most exact science, but it's the best we have to go off. And these claims are higher than I've seen over the past 4 years. So we are digging into that. Allingtown, as I mentioned, the revenues that are coming in from Allingtown are over budget, and that is, again, attributable to the calculation around the pilot funds. This particular report does not reflect additional contribution against the pension because it has not been approved by either the Allingtown Fire Commission or the City Council. One thing I will note is that in the city forecast, I have in fact included the hiring of a director beginning in, I believe I have it in March. So that allows us a month and a half to go through the hiring process. The costs for the current consultant are layered in there, as well as filling in the buyer. So from that perspective, I believe those costs are accounted for. And with that, I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Frank. Frank, on the general fund revenues and expenditures, I see you're projecting about a $1.4 million surplus, and you're still carrying contingency of around $1 million. So at this point, up to $2.4 million could potentially lapse absent any other changes. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now, and as part of the contingency other, there are various line items in there that will be expended. However, $300,000 of that is a line item built to increase the fund balance in fiscal 22.
Very good.
I can provide a more detailed breakdown to that, Madam Secretary, if you wish.
That would be great. Thank you, Frank. And with respect to the lapse in full-time salaries and the overage and overtime, are there any departments in particular that are struggling with recruitment that's resulting in the overtime cost?
Police are struggling right now. They're losing people to other towns. So that was brought up at the council meeting this past Monday night. And while I can't go into details because of contract negotiations, this is being addressed.
Very good. And finally, with respect to the projected surplus of 1.4 million plus, I just want to flag for you, Mayor, and for the team that in the event the Cohn-Resnick audit determines there has been misuse of funds, those dollars will need to be repaid back to the state for us to return to the feds. That program expired December 31st. That's the coronavirus relief fund. So I want to make sure that you are aware of that in advance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Tom, I see you have your hand up, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Secretary. So, Frank, you had indicated that your tax revenues are running on budget, essentially. Do you have any, but at this point, you're essentially showing exactly hitting the budget number. Do you have any additional information to share in terms of, whether you expect you're going to exceed your budget? Do you have any information on the motor vehicle supplement, which should have been billed either in December or 1st of January, which would indicate that you're either running ahead or below or behind that number?
The only thing I have, sir, is the line item detail on page 2, which breaks out the individual lines. As I go through to put this together, one data point that I'll use to evaluate the overall tax revenues is the table on page 3 that looks at where we are at any given point in time compared to the projected year-end tax revenues. And that compares against the prior 4 years. So we are at roughly 53% of where I'm saying we're going to end up compared to 53% in the prior year, and the 5-year average is 52.9.
Okay, so I think that's helpful. It would be good to get some information on your supplemental motor vehicle. And after your January collection, which you probably don't, get the final numbers until, 1st or 2nd of February, but looking at those numbers, I think can be useful as well.
Yes, sir. I'll follow up with the tax department.
Thank you. Other questions on the financial report for West Haven?
Madam Secretary, I did have a question.
Yes.
I had asked Cohn Resnick when I spoke to them earlier this week if line items are determined that we had put through on the report to be non-qualified. There are expenditures that we did not include in that report because the filing would not allow us to go over the 1.2 that was identified as West Haven's allotment. What is the process for replacing unqualified costs with what we would believe to be qualified? For example, security personnel that have been hired specifically because of the pandemic.
Frank, we're going to have to wait the findings in that audit report, and depending on what the conclusions are. But your justification for use of expenditures is as of the period of time you reported that into OPM. If we find that there are expenses that are not eligible or there is misuse, most likely you will end up just repaying those funds as opposed to shifting around to other types of expenditures. So this, as of a point in time, you fully expended dollars, and here was the use of funds. We will identify what was appropriate use and what was inappropriate use. Any inappropriate use will be returned to the state.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Other questions on the financial report for West Haven for November 2021?
If there are no other questions from the board members, I have a question.
Sure. Go ahead, Julian.
On the Allentown Fire Fund revenues, the revenues from the state were previously projected to exceed the budget by closer to $700,000 as a result of the change in the pilot formula. And I'm wondering if there was what is influencing the change there to a projected overage of just a couple $100,000.
I will look into the line item breakdown of that, Mr. Freund.
Okay.
I know we did have some in there, but I will look into the line item details.
Okay.
The line item that you need to focus on is the federal and state grant line item that says non-MARB. It went last month. The projection decreased by $770K.
I will look into that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions on the financial report? Okay, very good. Seeing none, we will move on to the City of Hartford. Julian will do the follow-up on the items that the board has requested, and we will see you in subcommittee in a very short period of time. Thank you so much. All right, we have the City of Hartford subcommittee update, and I think we have Mayor Bronin, I see Leanne Rawls on the line today. Good morning.
Jennifer will be providing us with the update. I was told that the mayor will not be able to join us today, Secretary.
Thank you so much, Kim. So why don't we start with Jennifer and Leanne, can you just confirm that you are with us today? There we go. Excellent. Good morning. Good morning. All right, for the subcommittee update, we have a written update in our materials, and Julian's going to provide us with an overview.
The subcommittee met on December 18th. I apologize for the typo there. It says November. And the subcommittee took a first look at a proposed labor contract, tentative agreement with the Hartford Municipal Employees Association. And that is an item on this agenda, so we will be getting to that momentarily. The subcommittee did vote to recommend approval of the contract by the full MARB. We took a look at a draft scope of services for some employee health insurance benefits analysis. We're looking to engage with a consultant to evaluate and compare comprehensively the costs of various plan options, and also a comparison with the state partnership plan and the impact that would have financially on the school district. We also reviewed an information request that was compiled from input from the board members or the subcommittee members regarding special education programming and costs. So we have a documented formal list which has been submitted to the school district to begin compiling and analyzing data in response to that list. And then we did our routine review of the city's budget mitigation measures and their progress in implementing those measures. And our next meeting will be on the 27th. And we expect to have the city's FY21 audit and auditor to present the audit findings or the results of the audit at that meeting. We're also anticipating a school labor contract. This is a contract that expired some time ago, was recently settled. And that is for the school special police officer union. Based on the timing, our current expectation is that we would follow that subcommittee meeting immediately with a special meeting of the board if we can accomplish that and get that contract reviewed and acted upon. And those are the two larger items that we're expecting for the January meeting.
Thank you. Thanks, Julian. Questions on the subcommittee report? Okay, we're going to move on to review, discussion, and possible action on the Hamiah contract, Hartford Municipal Employees Association. You have a package that shows the terms of the tentative agreement as well as that has been approved by, here we go, I think we're back in. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. This is a 2-year contract. It's been approved by both the union, and I'm getting a message of bad network, and so if you stop hearing me, Kim, just give a call, okay? It's been approved by the Hartford City Council and by the union. Just a reminder that our state statute provides MARB with an opportunity to act on the contract. We can approve, reject, or take no action. And if we do not take action, then the contract would be approved. MARB has until January 22nd to take action if we so choose. The Hartford Subcommittee did review this contract at their December 16th meeting and voted to recommend full approval, as Julian just indicated. And we will go over the fiscal impact comparables and terms of the agreement. I'm going to turn it over to the city to walk us through the details.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Secretary. And at a high level, this contract includes a 3% raise effective July 1st, 2021 for the first year and 0% for 22. It keeps all the steps going forward the same as they have been, so there's no change in the steps. Our 2022 budget actually included a 1.5% in GWI, so that was baked in with the steps. So while with the steps and with the 3%, that's roughly a $373,000 increase above the steps. So right, so not including the steps. I know in your initial, in what was given to you, we broke it down by here's your 3%, here's what the steps will cost. This is just solely based on what was not budgeted versus what was budgeted. So the change would be about $373,000, of which half of that was included in our kind of contingency line or in our mitigation line. So really, there's only about $175,000 effect on the budget, which can be absorbed at this time, we think, by vacancies throughout the various unions. So we feel that this is a, kind of a status quo contract that is in line with our other recent union contracts. And there were no other real changes. There was one small change to vacation, which allows the members to carry over 5 additional days, but they're not paid out upon termination, so there's no real fiscal impact there. And then also there was a small change to sick leave donations. It decreased their required amount that they had to have in their own sick bank in order to donate. That doesn't happen very often, so there's really no cost to that either. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Jennifer. And for a reminder for the board, as noted in Julian's write-up, the prior contract had 4 years of zeros and rather significant changes on healthcare and sick and vacation leave payout terms. So significant restructuring the last time around on this contract. So questions for Jennifer on the Hamiah contract? Bob?
No, I was just going to move to approve.
Okay. Very good. And any other comments or questions? I think you fared very well in light of the historical changes to this contract. And the 3%, given you're following it by 0%, is still very conservative. Obviously, the city has pretty good flexibility with the improvement in state aid, et cetera, to absorb that increase. So you're structurally able to accommodate this. And so I think you did a great job with the contract. If there are no other comments, go ahead.
I'll just second the motion.
Excellent. All right, so it's been motioned and seconded. Any discussion before Julian takes a vote? All right, Julian, over to you.
Okay, Mr. White,
Yes.
Mr. Waxenberg,
Yes.
Mr. Biller,
Yes.
Mr. Hamilton,
Yes.
Mr. Brockman,
Yes.
Ms. Shaw,
Yes.
Secretary McCaw,
Yes.
and are there any other members that joined the meeting that I did not name? That's everybody.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much. Next up is a non-labor contract for CREC for property management. Jennifer, you want to give us an overview?
Great, thank you. I'm actually going to turn this over to Ms. Julia Jack in our Department of Public Works. If she's there, you are.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you. I am going to report on the Learning Corridor. So the Capital Region Education Council was chosen as a property management to do property management services for the Learning Corridor campus. It's about 16-acre campus on 15 Vernon Street in Hartford. The RFP was issued in May of 2021, and CREC was our only respondent. This agreement is for the first year between October 1st, 2021, and will end in September 30th, 2022. This contract can be extended for 3 additional one-year terms in the city's discretion, of course. The estimated cost for each year of these years is about $826,000 a year, and it will be reimbursed by the Board of Education. And if you have any other questions or need more information, I'm here
Thank
to
you,
answer
Julia.
them.
Thank you, Julia. Julia, who was previously handling the property maintenance management for the Learning Corridor?
It was CREC.
Okay.
The last 4
Great.
years as well.
Thank you. Does the $826,000 represent an increase over their prior annual contract?
Yes, it does. It's approximately $230,000 more than it was in 2017.
Over in the 2017 contract was a, what's the annual percent increase?
Annual percent increase is probably about 10%.
Any particular reason why? But I mean, obviously they're the sole respondent, so you didn't really have much option there. Is it labor? Just curious.
Comparison. Yep, it's labor, it's materials, it's all of the above. They did add a couple of additional line items for pool maintenance, fire suppression systems, fire alarm systems, elevators. So they did add a couple of additional things, but yeah, it's both labor and materials. And experience. They learned a lot from the work before, what things need to be updated, and the learning corridor is 20 years old, so it is going to need a lot of maintenance at this point.
Thank you, Julia. Matt?
Was there an analysis done as to whether or not the city or the Board of Education would be able to sort of take on this role as opposed to putting it right back out to RFP? And you all do plenty of property management currently, so.
Yes, well, with our staffing at this point, that would be a heavy lift. It'd be a lot to ask. We have a whole city that we're working on, and the manpower. From my analysis, I don't think that'd be something we can take on efficiently. We didn't do an official analysis to see the comparison of what that would mean in terms of if we hired other staff for, that we didn't do.
Okay. Can I encourage it before this goes back out to RFP the next time that analysis be done, especially if we're seeing 10% increases then too? I think it's a worthwhile
Yes.
looking at that efficiency of scale that maybe the city and Board of Ed already has.
That's a good
Even if you
idea.
have to add 1 or 2 staff to make it work.
Right. Noted, definitely, yes.
Thank you. And maybe before you do you have the option to extend. So if you're considering extending, then do the analysis before then. Tom, you had your hand.
Yeah, I am wondering if there's any thoughts about why there was only one bidder on the project. It seems to me for maintenance and custodial services, there are a number of firms that are in that business, and I would have expected more than one response. So obviously, anytime you only get one response, you're never sure whether you've got really a good solid price or not. So is there any thought about why you only had one response and what you might do next time to potentially tweak the RFP to make it more attractive to other vendors?
Yes, that definitely crossed our minds. And I think it's because of legacy. CREC does use the property, and they're also helping to maintain the property. So it could have been the bidding environment with the pandemic going on and costs. Yeah, I think it could have been a combination of the two.
Okay, well, I would certainly encourage you to think about for maybe next year. I guess this is only coming to us for review, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes.
But I would encourage you to think about next year, both doing the analysis to looking at whether or not in-house is a viable option, and then potentially looking to put it back out again next year to try to, encourage competition.
Yes, yeah. And we could solicit and, talk to companies, build up interest. So that's another way we can potentially get more bidders, at least at that stage. So yeah, these are great ideas. Thank you.
Mark.
These are Hartford operated schools or CREC and Hartford operated schools. Under Chef, who basically is the employer of the staff at the learning corridor, Hartford or CREC?
Both.
It's one of those partnership agreements. So
yes.
When CREC did this 20 years ago, as I recall, they created a for-profit arm, and this is part of it. But I do agree. I think time has come where there needs to be an analysis done. I think you were subjected historically to the easiest way to deal with a desegregation issue 20 years ago, and CREC filled that void. But at this point in time, it may be time to review, at least at this level, the maintenance level, how we might be able to see different possibilities for maintenance of that facility.
Yeah.
Other comments? Okay. Julie, it looks like we'll see you again next year on this particular contract. Thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. We're going to turn to our review of the monthly financial report for the City of Hartford. And Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. So if we're just comparing our P5, so our November reports, to our the P4 reports, I wanted to report that we decreased our unfavorability by just about $2 million. So our new net unfavorable is projected to be about $874,000. It's a little bit higher than it was this time last year for a variety of reasons. I still expect that to turn the corner and be a surplus in the coming months, mainly due to attrition. But at a high level, the changes from this month to last month, we saw an improvement in our revenue of about $488,000. The significant reasons for these changes are we continue to see strong current and prior year property tax in collections. So we've increased those by about $586,000, and that really just represents what we saw in prior year property tax collections, as well as the MTS, or the car taxes for folks that do not have their cars registered in Connecticut. That's being conservative. So we didn't change anything for the fact that we're still seeing favorable current year property tax collections. We'll adjust that in January once we see, once we finalize the December collections and once we see what January is. So that's conservative. We've also seen continued increases in conveyance taxes and transcripts of records. So we've increased that by about $326,000. And then we did have a decrease of about $400,000 in pilots due to a property that we had budgeted significantly higher than what actually came in, which it was a hotel. So it made sense. We just had it budgeted too high. So I decreased that this month. On the expenditure side, we saw an improvement of about $589,000. The significant changes there are prior year refunds and appeals. Actually, we had to increase that budget by about $575,000 due to two large refunds. One was a settlement, one was a judgment. We have payroll expenses that decreased by about $921,000, basically due to attrition, but that was net of overtime. So we are seeing significant overtime in fire right now that's not being offset by attrition. We're hoping that that's going to turn the corner. We're still keeping an eye on that, though. They did just hire a new class. They have about 24 new recruits that are being trained up right now. So hopefully by the end of this fiscal year, they'll be able to start offsetting that overtime, but definitely keeping an eye on that. And then utilities actually saw a net decrease of about $164,000, but we're continuing to watch that. We think that our water has evened out. That was our big hit at the beginning of the year. But it's hard to predict what our gas bill and things will be as the winter has been, knock on wood, relatively mild. So hopefully that will continue. But we believe we're fairly conservative in our utility budget as well. So those are the big changes from this month to last month. Also, we have about $2.3 million in actual contingency dollars remaining. Some of that is reserved for other things, but we're projecting that we'll spend all of that. So that is being conservative. We are not seeing the savings in healthcare costs that we saw last year. So we're not changing that at all. We still think we'll be within budget. That our projections continue. They also include $1 million contingency in that, but we definitely are not seeing the savings that we've seen in prior years. So those are the high levels. So if there's any questions, I can take them now.
Jennifer, can you talk a little bit about fire, police, and emergency services and telecommunications? All three departments are running deficiencies. I know you talked a little bit about the recruitment for fire, and you hope to see overtime rebound. Just want to understand what's happening from a staffing perspective in those agencies driving the OT deficiencies.
Yep. So at a high level, fire should even out now that they have the 24 recruits. That effectively gets them to whole, I believe. We've got some workers' comp cases and that kind of thing out that drives some overtime, but we're internally looking into that very closely to figure out what's going on there. For police, while they are showing a deficit right now, we still think that that overtime will be eaten up by the attrition that's in that department. So I don't believe that you'll see a deficit in that in the next month or two. I think that that should go away.
Is the
And then
worsened in police? I'm just looking at prior year, you spent 13 million. You budgeted pretty consistently, but you're projecting 17.7 million. You know, it's a $5 million deficiency in OT. So is it primarily driven by police? And have we seen a significant number of retirements? So headcount is low?
yes, and police headcount is low. Yeah, I think I'd have to look back at the numbers and I can report back at the subcommittee, but I believe that it's at the lowest numbers that it has been in a long time, but I can get those numbers for you for subcommittee.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then we're seeing the same in in emergency services and telecommunications. We also have a significant number of vacancies, but it looks like that might be turning the corner too. Some of those folks are in the 1716 union, and they're working on negotiations for that right now. So we've got things in the works to hopefully settle some of these issues that they're seeing. But yeah, I don't believe that we'll see the overtime eat up the attrition savings for emergency services by the end of the year either. So those two should be okay. It's fire that we're still keeping an eye on though.
Got it. Very good. And just noting on the full-time line, you're projecting 97 million, spent 86.8 million. So there's a little room there potentially to come down depending on what happens with vacancies. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Other questions? Okay. So we'll look to see those numbers improve in the months to come. Keep our eye on it. We'll do some follow-up at subcommittee. That concludes all of our agenda items for the City of Hartford. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for being here today. And Leanne. We'll move on to the town of Sprague. First up, the subcommittee update. We have not had a subcommittee since the last full MARB meeting. However, Julian is prepared to provide a verbal update. Julian?
The only item I have to update on the town of Sprague is that we are working on a budget adoption calendar that will hopefully work seamlessly with the MARB meeting calendar and the town's budget adoption process, which involves more stops along the way and entities than our other municipalities. And we have no subcommittee meeting scheduled for this month. The next regularly scheduled subcommittee meeting for Sprague would be February 24th.
Questions for Julian? Okay, Town of Sprague monthly financial report for November. And if we can have a member from the town provide an update.
Sure. For the end of November, the total revenues were roughly on a par from last year. So that's pretty much in the same category. Additionally, expenses are pretty much right along the same line. The only item that was a little bit different were the interest income, fees, and permits are lower than last year, partially because the fees and permits actually have been lower. Less people perhaps are doing repairs and so forth to their homes, but also the capitalized interest for the GO bond had not physically transferred in yet, so that will show a little bit of a change there. So it's just a little bit of a timing on that, but otherwise everything is pretty much at the par from last year.
Thank you. Projecting a small operating surplus?
At this time, yes.
Okay. Very good. Questions on the Sprague financial report?
The major driver, obviously, of any small town such as Sprague is the Board of Ed budget. And consistently with Sprague, it was the special education side, which is showing on transportation and tuition significant over expenditures. And we know that those are, to a degree, uncontrollable. But my question, if the superintendent's online, or maybe we can get a response a written response. Is there any, does the superintendent anticipate any further erosion on those line items that could cause them some problems? I'm looking at a bottom line of about 36,000, even with significant over expenditures in those line items, which is, you know, understandable. Special ed is uncontrollable, so to speak. But the question is, forecasting down the road, is there any surprises that the superintendent may be seeing that could create some difficulties?
This is Bill Hull, the superintendent. At this time, we don't anticipate any surprises, but that's always nice to say. You never know. We anticipate a surplus of around $80,000, and again, that's very conservatively estimated that it may grow over time. But right now, we don't see anything this year that would cause us to have to worry.
Good. I know that you've been working very, very hard to try to get a handle on those special ed costs, which are a major driver, and I commend you for doing that. I just want to make sure that we don't see any surprises. But again, that's something that you can't control, and I'm glad to hear that you don't anticipate any.
We have, again, budgeted very conservatively, so I think we're going to be fine moving forward.
Excellent. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions on Sprague's financial report? One quick question. Can you just remind us where you last closed on fund balance?
I don't think I have that right here, and Melissa's out of the office. So I can get that. Would you like me to send that over?
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I can certainly do that.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we have completed our items for Sprague. With respect to other business, the Hartford Subcommittee is meeting on January 27th. And we are expecting to have a special meeting of the MARB immediately following subcommittee to take action on a labor contract. So just a quick heads up to the board, and more to come from Kim and Julian. With that, if there's no further other business, then happy to take a motion to adjourn. Thank you all.
So moved, Bob White.
Thank you. Someone want a second?
Second, Mark.
Excellent. And we're all in favor. Go ahead and say aye, and wishing you a very happy new year. Thank you all for your continued dedication to our work, and I'll see you very soon.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everyone. Bye-bye.